Captain Seraphine Kane pressed her palms against the console, her eyes locked on the primary monitor. A swirling orb occupied the center of the galaxy map, its surface a bizarre shifting marble of strawberry pink and vanilla white. It defied every planetary classification in the database. She tapped the comms relay with a sharp, rhythmic pulse. Seconds later, the bridge doors hissed open. Milo Batterson, Nova Bellamy, and Lyra Blueberry stepped onto the deck, their movements synchronized by habit. Seraphine pointed to the screen without looking away. The thermal signature was reading as absolute 0, yet the spectrum analyzer flagged it as frozen dairy. The bridge fell into a heavy, analytical silence. Lyra leaned over the sensor array, her fingers flying across the holographic interface to verify the impossible data. It remained constant. Seraphine straightened her posture, her gaze hardening with resolve. She looked at the navigation terminal. The flight path was calculated, locked, and verified. She keyed in the final command for the jump drive. The ship groaned as the engines engaged, vibrating through the floor plates. As the stars elongated into streaks of light, the crew braced for the jump, watching the pink and white sphere grow larger on the view screen. Space warped back into reality, but the silence was instant. A field of jagged, conical asteroids drifted directly into their path, spinning in the void like stone teeth. Seraphine gripped the manual thrusters, her knuckles white. She banked the ship hard, the hull groaning as it skirted the stone cones by mere inches. The ship shuddered, then broke through the thick, sugary clouds. Below, the plains of hardened mint chip rock rose to meet them. Touchdown was a violent jolt. The airlock cycled open, spilling the crew onto the surface. Their boots crunched against the frozen, granular ground. Nova scanned the horizon, noting the strange, crystalline flora. Then, the silence changed. A figure stepped out from the tree line, moving with a fluid, predatory grace. It had the agile frame of a human, but its face was dominated by the powerful, fanged features of a saber-toothed tiger. It stopped 10 paces away, blocking their path. Seraphine held up a hand, signaling for the crew to remain still. The hybrid did not attack. Instead, it gestured toward the distant hills with a low, rhythmic growl. The mission had just moved beyond simple exploration. They were now under observation by a guardian. The hybrid led them deeper into the Seraplanes, moving with a silence that made the crew feel clumsy and loud. Every step crunched like breaking glass against the frozen ground. Seraphine kept her hand near her pulse rifle, watching the horizon. The landscape was vast, beautiful, and entirely indifferent to their presence. Then, the light shifted. The bright, sugary sky turned a bruised, sickly violet. A heavy, unnatural pressure settled over the plains, muffling the sound of their own footsteps. The temperature plummeted, turning the air brittle. Ahead, the hybrid stopped abruptly, its ears twitching toward the clouds. It let out a sharp, warning hiss, the fur on its neck standing rigid. Seraphine looked up. The clouds were no longer drifting. They were roiling, thick with a dark, viscous substance that blotted out the sun. She felt the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes staring down from the gloom. The crew huddled together, the earlier sense of discovery replaced by the cold realization that they were being hunted. The wind died completely, leaving a vacuum of sound that pressed against their eardrums. Something was shifting in the dark canopy above, waiting for the right moment to descend. The sky shattered. A swarm of chocolate bats plummeted, their wings trailing molten ganache like burning rain. They screeched, a sound of grinding metal that tore through the silence. Seraphine pulled her pulse rifle, the weapon humming as it charged. Beside her, the Taiga hybrid unleashed a roar and surged forward, claws raking through the air to intercept the first wave. Bursts of energy lit the gloom, shattering the creatures into shards of dark sugar. Seraphine pivoted, firing into the swarm, but her eyes locked on the horizon. Milo and Nova were gone. She toggled her radio, scanning for a signal, and found it. Lyra pointed toward a nearby depression in the plains. The sensors pinged. The pair were floating in a sea of liquid blueberry ice cream, drifting with total indifference while the battle raged above. Seraphine roared into the comms. "Get out of there. Now!" The command cut through the static. On the shore, The two drifted closer to the edge, oblivious to the carnage. The swarm dived again, wings dripping heat. Seraphine and the hybrid stood back to back, forming a wall of fire as the chaotic struggle for the team began in earnest. The final pulse blast echoed across the plains, scattering the last of the swarm. Seraphine wiped her visor, gestured to the ship, and the group moved with practiced urgency. The Tiger hybrid kept pace, its golden eyes scanning the tree line for lingering threats. They reached the ramp just as the ground began to harden again, the temperature swinging back to a biting, frozen chill. Once inside, Seraphine slammed the manual override and the airlock hissed shut, sealing out the sugary chaos. Engines flared. The ship groaned under the pressure of the ascent, and the surface of the planet shrank into a tiny, marbled point of light. Hours later, the docking clamps at the station engaged with a metallic thud. The transition was absolute. Seraphine sat at her desk, the silence of the command deck, a stark contrast to the screeching battle. She tapped the console, the report window flickering into life. She watched the stars drift by, a steady, rhythmic pulse in the viewport. Beside her, the hybrid stood motionless, watching the same abyss. The mission was complete. Her hands stopped moving, and for the first time in weeks, the tension in her shoulders finally unspooled.